What's up, everybody? Ryan Murphy here, and I'm here to give you my review of The Avengers. If you haven't been watching this up to this point, I've had 5 previous videos, just me with my low definition webcam sitting in this nondescript blank room in my house. Trying to get my thoughts out there because I really want to talk about films more in depth and talk about structure more and talk about how films could have been better and just sort of give a little bit of a different review than typically goes on because I like talking about this stuff. So offered my takes on the first 5 movies. I basically like them all in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I like the Avengers. However, I will say I'm not as big a fan of the Avengers as a lot of other people. A lot of people talk about the Avengers like, oh man, and the Avengers happened to, and it was so good. It was just like this great film, and this is not a great film. This is a good film, and it's mostly worth it for the last half hour. Um, Now, what we've talked about, or what I've talked about here in these previous videos, is the A and the C. Every film has to tell a story, and that story is the A and the C. We want characters to get from here to here. My thing's reversed, so it's really weird. Like this is my that's my right hand. Anyway, we want characters to get from here to here, and the B, A, B, C. The B is how they get there, but the A and the C are the main is the main point of the story. And the A and the C of the Avengers is basically let's get the Avengers together. And so in order to do that, the story, the truest form of the A and the C becomes the Avengers come together, but they don't really work that well as a team. Can they come together? I always like to quote the Brady Bunch. Now this group must somehow form a family. Of course, they have conflicting personalities, and then they have to unite as a team. In that respect, this film does not really accomplish that, and I'll talk about why. Um, this film's main issue is in the middle act, and again, if you haven't watched these, I talk about the 3 acts: the first, the second, and the third. First act of this movie is fine. Honest Trailers called it, pretty boring. It's the first 45 minutes where they're just assembling everybody. And I liked Thor's entrance. I thought Thor's entrance would have been a lot better in a film that was his follow up to a film that was not Thor, that ended with him being, not being able to get back to Earth. Of course, they just sort of copped out. That was a weird thing where, again, I feel like they wrote themselves into a corner. I feel like they felt they had to end Thor in a dramatic way where he couldn't get back to Earth. And then there was going to be some tease where you could find a way back to Earth, but they were going to make this film before they were going to make a Thor 2. And then when we get to this film, just the way it narratively plays out, you don't really have the opportunity to go back to Asgard and see him, trying to find a way back to Earth. So he just shows up and it's like, oh yeah, how, Odin got dark magic and whatever. And it totally, ruins the ending of Thor. Honest Trailers brought that up too. And, again, so I can sort of feel for him because I feel like they wrote themselves into a corner and they didn't really know what to do. But I've always felt cheated. I've always felt like we should at least get like some sort of scene, like a flashback in the second Thor movie or something for the DVD. I know there was a comic book, but come on, like. But I do think that I mean, if you really, really tried, again, I want to talk about how the films could have been better. What create an imaginary version in my head. And I feel like you could have done something where it's like that opening scene of like the Tesseract has awakened. That could have been like Odin and we see Thor, and then it's just like we have a way or something like that, and then we just sort of fade out and then we don't see him again for like 45 minutes, because the reason the Thor entrance works is it's really cool. We've introduced to everyone kind of Captain America and Iron Man coming together, and then boom, here comes Thor. It's a great entrance for a film that's not a follow-up to Thor. You know what I mean? Like, Joss Whedon wrote it great, and I really like a lot of how he handles the characters throughout that first 45 minutes. But I feel like you could still get that. It wouldn't be Thor's first appearance in the film, but it's his first appearance for like 45 minutes. It's like, oh yeah, man, that was a long time ago. Yeah, there Thor is. So I don't know. There's that. A lot of people talk about Hawkeye not having a lot of characterization. I think we got as much Hawkeye as was appropriate. Joss Whedon talked about how in the first draft or two of the script, he did have Hawkeye just on the helicarrier with everyone else, just like with Black Widow, and it was everyone being together, and he just thought it was missing something. And I will say, narratively, there's just something about it that works kind of well by not having just everybody be in one place and everybody just talking and we don't get along and everything, and then it's just very straightforward. But to actually have one character who's removed and that they're looking for and all that sort of stuff, who then joins them up in the end to complete the group. Sort of, he doesn't complete the group until the third act. And I like that. As far as him not getting enough characterization because of it. I don't know. He's sort of this character who just we see a little bit of. He's got a little bit of mystery about him, and in the third act where that almost kind of works for it because all we know about him is that he's cool. He's a badass. He likes to spout some one-liners. So I didn't really have a problem with Hawkeye's characterization in this film. Thor, the Thor thing was the main problem with the first act. But to be honest, the first act is pretty good. The second act is great, or the third act is great, where there's just the last half hour. It's worth everything. I mean, the score is amazing. Again, I've with every single one of these films so far, except for Iron Man 2, I have said that I have loved the scores. This whole notion that the Marvel movies didn't have great scores that you'll see all these videos about on YouTube is just garbage. Like they've had great scores from day one. The biggest problem was they didn't bring back the Iron Man score, Ramin Djawadi's Iron Man score back for Iron Man 2. That was the biggest issue of that film, and I wish in this film you would have seen more recurrence of their themes from the previous films. They seem to suffer from this problem where if they didn't get the composer back, they can't use his themes, which is not, I mean, I don't know if that's the reason they're not using the themes. I think sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. Oftentimes in franchises, you'll see changing composers in the same score, John Williams in the Harry Potter movies, whatever. But for whatever reason, they're just not using the scores, and I would have really loved to have seen that. They do that a little bit in Age of Ultron because they had, for a while there, had a consistent composer, Brian Tyler, who was sort of Marvel Studios composer before something went wrong. But back to this film. First act's good, third act's good. The biggest problem with this film is the middle act. That is okay. So like I said, the A and the C is the Avengers get together and they have to work out how to become a group, how to become a team, how to become a family. That's all for the second act. That's all. That's where that has to be, and it's not there. Um, you know, it's literally like are Cap and Iron Man gonna get along? Thor is criminally underutilized. I noted, okay, whatever you think of his introduction or how it repudiated the ending of the Thor movie, the fact is that in this movie he does not get justice. This is Joss Whedon. This is the king of character interaction, and great character building dialogue and groups of characters. That's why he was brought into this movie. And Thor's just not getting it. This is a fascinating character that, how does Tony Stark relate to Thor? What kind of conversations do they have? We get like 5 words between them. How does Thor relate to Captain America? Why might Thor not accept Captain America's leadership at first? He is, after all, a few thousand years old and a battle veteran. Could Iron Man and Thor not get along? I mean, what are the relationships here? I mean, in Iron Man 2, Black Widow was not taking Iron Man seriously at all, and here, I mean, they don't really even get another character moment for the most part really until kind of there was a moment I like between them in Captain America: Civil War. I want to know how they all relate together. Instead, the only character relationships that are really built are Iron Man and Bruce Banner, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, which became this big, very popular bromance, right? And Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, and they don't get along. And then the whole reason they don't get along is just this one argument that they have. I mean, that's basically the middle act. They get on the helicarrier. They have some exposition, what we're going to do about Loki. And then there's this argument that breaks out, right? And it's mostly just between, you really look at it, it's mostly just between Cap and Iron Man. And they have this one thing where, I mean, obviously Tony Stark does not rub everyone the right way. Tony Stark is not really that good of a guy. Tony Stark is an arrogant douche. So, of course, Steve Rogers doesn't, warm to him right away. And he's like, oh, you're just flash and substance. And then he's like, yeah, well, nothing special about you, just came out of a bottle, which is an insult that we know is repudiated by the entire movie of Captain America: The First Avenger. He just has to figure that out for himself, I guess, that this is a very special human being. That's it. And it's an argument that's brought about by this staff that's, corrupting their minds or whatever. And then they manage to, of course, and there's like, okay, Nick Fury is going to use the Tesseract to build weapons. Doesn't have to do with the Avengers fighting each other. Thor's like, you are so petty and weak. Doesn't have a conflict with any other character. It's basically the whole second act of how this group must somehow form a family is that Iron Man and Captain America have a very brief argument. Then Thor is separated from the crowd, doesn't get to have any more interaction with them in the meantime. And Nick Fury gives this big pep talk to, you guessed it, Iron Man and Captain America. You guys gotta get along. And so, is this just supposed to be the story of how Iron Man and Cap eventually get along? Because it's not very powerful at that. Again, they literally just had like one very brief argument. Okay, I get you a little bit more now. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is about this is about the last half hour. This is about getting the heroes together for that last slam bang half hour brawl, and that is worth the price of admission right there. It's the Avengers. It's Alan Silvestri's score, and that scene. That's my proud. That's my secret captain. I'm always angry. You know it. That's amazing. We all loved it. We all freaked out. Great stuff. Yeah. Other than that, the middle act, and again, you can see the three acts, right? Like the first act ends with Iron Man and Cap getting together somewhere between there and when Thor appears or when they get on the helicarrier, whatever. But then the second act, like that's the darkest hour when they actually take Loki away. Like they think they have Loki. That's the end of the first act. The bad guys take Loki away. End of the second act. Break into three. You can very clearly see the three acts there. You can very clearly see first act is to introduce everyone. Second act is to make them question if they can be a team, end on a note of darkness, and then the third act is let's save the day. There's even that huzzah moment a little bit where Tony's like, "Son of a bitch," and he figures out where Loki's going. That's we talked about in the Iron Man review. Go back and watch it about the huzzah moment, break into the third act. So good movie, mainly based on the action, the characters in the third act, the score. Not so much really anything else for me, but yeah, Avengers. I mean, I can't bad about it too much. It's obviously a good movie, so someone would find me if I were to just say I hate this movie. But there it is. And I'll be back with Phase 2, so I'm looking forward to doing Phase 2. And thanks a lot, you guys.